quite a lot of games that come to Steam recently, along with the birth of a few new genres that everyone seems to want to get their hands on. Open world survivals is one of them, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this genre, but there are massive problems with the games individually. Now, when a new genre comes out and increases in popularity, you have a lot of companies jumping on board. This happened with horror games, with 3D platformers, with open world sandbox in general. It's almost like a fad system, but when it comes to sandbox survival games, they tend to all be predominantly made by indie developers, or small studios, but that's not the point of the video. I want to talk about some of the flaws that almost every one of these games have. The first one is early access. Most, if not all, of these open world survival games are in early access. Now, that in itself is not much of an issue. What is, though, is that they never seem to release, and probably never will. Games like Rust, H1Z1, Ark Survival Evolved, Hurt World, and yeah, a lot of these games have only been in early access for a couple years, but they all talk about how much content they want to add in the game before it's released. And from what it sounds like, it's gonna take a few years more to develop it all. Why do they do it this way? Why wouldn't they just develop a game and then come out with it like other devs do? Well, as I said before, these studios are generally smaller. Early access gives a certain stability to these developers. Not only can they sell their game, but they can take input from the community. They can tweak the game in real time as you play. They can actively see how many people are interested in the game firsthand. Take constructive criticism and grow said community so that when it does finally release, if ever, it will already have a healthy launch. But their pitfalls are pretty severe as well. They don't have to take criticism so much because the fans of the game will use, well, the game's not finished yet as an excuse for poor mechanics, gameplay, or even worse, optimization. The developers themselves can hide behind it not being a finished product. Thereby, they never have to give a release date and just assure the community that the game is being worked on. Of course, it's easy to tell if the developer is sincere about that, but along with the stability early access grants, it also has the potential to let a developer do things he normally wouldn't be praised for. For example, loot crates, DLC skins, or cosmetic microtransactions. Now, none of these are inherently bad. They actually can do well to support devs as they work on the game. See, a normal dev team would release a game, make money off it, release another game. These days, microtransactions are thrown in for extra profit, which is actually really scummy. When it comes to early access, though, the initial sales of the game could be enough to help develop, which is what early access is for. But you almost have a pass when implementing cosmetic microtransactions because it further helps the developers make more money to invest into the game. And the fact that this tactic can be used maliciously but is also hard to tell if it's necessary makes early access annoying. How am I supposed to know the developer needs that money for the game or is just implementing it because he's money hungry? I can't know that. So long as it's cosmetic though, that's fine. It's just a system I wonder if it's being abused, and because we're in early access, we have special rights to use it and not be questioned about it. It just depends on the developer and how much you trust he's doing it for the right reasons. The second thing I noticed is kind of small, but for being small really annoys me. When someone tells you they bought an RPG, you know what the game is going to be like mechanic-wise. When someone tells you they bought a stealth game, same thing. Same with a strategy and an MMO and a MOBA and a shooter, but when it comes to these open-world survival games, they're not a genre that has a specific mechanic set. What I mean by this is when someone tells you they bought an online multiplayer shooter, you think Call of Duty or CSGO or Battlefield. You know what to expect. When someone says they got a MOBA, again, you know what to expect. I admit I am generalizing, and of course not all of these games in these genres are all the same, but the skeleton is there. RPG relies on RPG mechanics, stealth games rely on stealth mechanics, and you can of course have these games that implement the two, but when it comes to open world survival games, these things are all over the place. Again, the genre is still quite new, so there isn't a golden standard. For example, in Rust you spawn in, run around and collect resources to build a base. You have the same amount of health as everyone else in the server, but you can find and build armor to help you out. The game tries to convey a more realistic set of survival mechanics, which I personally like. Other games like Ark Survival Evolved and Conan Exiles have a level up system, so that when you spawn in and gather resources, build bases, you level up as you do. Level your health, your stamina, your food capacity. Enemies in the map have levels as well, which makes the game extremely RPG-like, and as much as I would like to get into RPGs, they never seem to keep my interest. Besides that, the biggest problem I have with this is that in sandbox survivals that have these mechanics, you're not only fighting against the environment, the enemies, but you're fighting against your own health system, your food, your water consumption, and then other players. If you spawn into a server that people have been in for a while, not only do they have bases and armor, but they have leveled health and damage. I just don't think it makes things very fair. I prefer besting players with wit rather than level. Well, Barry, a counter to that is you can jump into a server with friends. then level up together, and that keeps it fair, but the problem is that most of the appeal to these games is the online aspect. Fighting against real-world players in a simulated survival of the fittest environment. Removing that aspect is like removing the lyrics in vocal-centric music. Of course you can still enjoy it, but it's missing something. One big thing on PC nowadays is mods. Mods are bigger than ever, and they can really help a developer when it comes to these games. Be it mods to stabilize a poorly optimized game, make it start properly for certain systems, to cosmetic mods that change the way the game looks, and then you have mods that actually change the game, and this increases the lifespan of games in general. But in a lot of these survival games, again, you have these small teams working on it here, and they may not have a lot of disposable income to throw at servers. In turn, dedicated servers are generally off limits, and you have to buy a server, implement the mods, and then play the game, which is kind of a poor system. I mean, I understand, don't get me wrong, but when you buy a game, you don't typically expect to be paying for servers, and the servers are generally a subscription thing, so if you buy one thinking you'll be using it a lot and then you don't, that can just be a nuisance. Another thing when it comes to servers is in these games, they have to refresh. There comes a point when the map is full of abandoned buildings that were raided and everyone has top-level gear. The game calms down. Now, a few games have implemented building disintegrations where over time, if the house isn't used, it weakens until it breaks down and disappears, but most of the time you just get a server wipe, because that takes too long. A server wipe means you now have to grind all the way back up and do it again, and I love this and I don't. See, these games are generally procedural. You spawn in, get to know the map, build up a base, raid your neighbors, get raided, instill payback, become top dog, and then start over in a different map with different neighbors and different experiences. Plus, as the game goes on, new enemies and weapons are released, so you can give those a try on your way to the top again. But that also gets repetitive as hell. Now, this one depends on the person, and of course, this isn't the only game you have to play. But when they're all really similar and they all work like this, you can only see their future being server wipes. Is this a problem? Well, maybe not, but it's kind of annoying when I find a good server, build myself up, go through my trials, and then log in one day and see that I have to start over. I'm sure there'll be servers in these games when the game actually does release, if ever, that just make abandoned buildings disappear and somehow balance the server in such a way that you always feel challenged no matter what, but I have yet to see one do that very well. I do have to say though, I love these games. Open world survival is addicting and the experiences are fun. I have amazing memories in Rust that I can't say I have in other games that makes me keep coming back for more. And I'm sure everyone who's played one of these games generally does have those same stories as well. Normally I end with a pun or a play on words, but this time I want to tell you a story that really stuck with me. I was playing Rust with my friends when I happened upon this base. It was a huge base with 3 entrances. It looked like a few people were living in there, but they dumped all their resources into their base. I, on the other hand, had guns and armor. I have one of my friends run up to the house as a nude and tell the players that he has armor for them. If they give him metal fragments, he'll give them the armor. Now, this plan was simple. If they come out to bargain with my friend, he would have a weak weapon on him. I, on the other hand, would be hiding in the bushes close by with my rifle. If they came out, I would shoot them before they could close the door and run in. If instead they shoot him and kill him, their curiosity would still prompt them to check the dead body, and since he was a nude, it wouldn't scare them to leave their base. Well, the latter happens. They shoot my friend and he respawns back at our base. Now, there were 4 of us. I was in the bushes closest to the base, 2 others on a hill waiting for my signal, and then the friend who was shot was now at the base loading up to join the fight. Well, I rushed in, killing 2 of the men who were looting the body. I run inside and notice all 3 entrances led to one entrance that was locked. I go to turn around, and one of them, before death, had closed the door. Now I was trapped. I now had to wait in a hallway until a door had opened, and the one that I was next to that would lead me into their base actually did open. I killed the guy who opened the door and got into their treasure room. All 3 of them had respawned, and I had all of their loot. I was stronger than all of them, but I was outnumbered and I was trapped. I made a call to everyone from my base and told them to make C4 as fast as possible. I held these people that I had raided off in their own base for about 30 minutes while enough C4 was brewed to blow open a hole in the wall and let me out. Well, we did it, and we were sprinting away. I made it all the way up the hill, running as fast as possible with my base mates when my screen goes black. I had been shot in the head by someone in the tower of their base. We got as much loot off my body as we possibly could, and in the end returned with almost the same amount of loot as we started with. But now, we had very unfriendly next door neighbors, and trust me, we continued this little battle over and over, and it was awesome. You guys want to know how it ended? Server wipe.